Hey Cardfighters, Chris here from Vanguard Central. This deck I've got for you is a Flower Maiden Nectar Stride deck. And so we'll just get straight into it. The main boss of the deck is Ranunculus Flower Maiden Asha. She has two skills. If you don't know, the first is a Stride bonus, which is when you stride you can counterblast one and choose one of your units. And then you can take one unit from your deck that has the same name as the unit you chose and call it to rearguard. And I'll just call that copying because the other version is kind of a mouthful. And then the unit that you place from your deck gets plus 2,000 until end of turn, which helps a little bit, but is not as important as being able to fill your field, not use too many cards from hand, and really for setting up her Generation Break 2 effect, which is all your units get a continuous skill on Vanguard or Rearguard, and that skill is that if there's another card with the same name as this unit, it gets plus 5,000. And that means if you have two, then they each get plus 5,000. But if you have a third one, then everyone doesn't get plus 10,000. It's just everyone has plus 5,000 because it only counts. Oh, I have a copy, so it gets plus 5,000. She's a main boss because the stride bonus is super useful. You just get continuous extra calling over throughout the game, which can really help against retire decks and obviously helps you set up your field amazingly. So the backup boss that we have chosen is Vegetable Avatar Dragon. And this is a really tough spot, I think, because there are a few choices, and to be completely honest, I feel like a lot of them aren't that good, but Vegetable Dragon does, he does what we need him to do, which is on ride, he has Counterblast 1, Soul Blast 1, and you can choose one of your rear guards and get a copy of it from the deck and call that to rear guard. And so that's very similar to Asha's Stride bonus skill, but it's only going to work when you ride him. That's a really good skill if you're trying to, be really aggressive early, and it's not that bad if you have to ride him. You get a free call if you don't get to ride Asha. And again, being able to do that skill before Generation Break, before your opponent is at grade 3, can really help you get in some extra rushing, which can be very important. And then Vegetable Dragon also has a Generation Break 1 skill. Doesn't actually get used that much, but at the beginning of your main phase, you can Counterblast 1 and search for another Vegetable Dragon and call it to rearguard from your deck. That can be a really good card just for setting up the field. If you have one Vegetable Dragon, you get another one from your deck, or over the course of 2 turns, you can get a full front row of Vegetable Dragons, and that can be useful for effects that need the same name to go off. So, with those grade 3s out of the way, we'll go into our grade 2s. The first is Maiden of Gladius. Her skill, if you don't know, she's the Amber clone, which means she's a Generation Break 1 skill, and if you attack and she's boosted, you get a Counterblast 1, and choose one of your other rear guards, so you can't choose the one that's being boosted, and then you get to copy that rear guard from your deck and call it to rear guard. So this is a really good card for, again, building that field, building the right named field, so you can get all your rear guards of the same name. Well, not all of them, but have a lot of copies of the same name, so you can set up Asha's skill or set up various other skills. So it's super important for the deck. The next grade 2 we're going to talk about is just the Generation Break 12k attacker, Grace Knight. So we're using Grace Knight because it can hit numbers if you have the right field, but also it's just important to have, for getting extra attacks off, if you want to call a rear guard, say with Gladiolus, and what you can do is you can attack with Grace Knight, use Gladiolus to copy another Grace Knight right on top of that Grace Knight, which kills the first one, and then you get another attack, which doesn't have to be boosted, which is very important. So with a good use of Grace Knight, you can get extra attacks off and put some extra pressure on your opponent, which is why we have him. So the last grade 2 is Maiden of Flourscreen. This card is notoriously expensive, and that is because it's Generation Break skill once per turn. You can return a normal unit, so anything that's not a trigger, from your drop zone, and you put it on top of your deck, and then you shuffle your deck, and this guy will get the name of any of your other units, which sets up just amazingly for Asha's skill, and obviously other skills, because, sorry about that, some construction outside. Because if you have Maiden of Flourscreen out, you can just use her skill to copy Asha's name, and they'll both get plus 5,000, even if you don't have another Asha. So just being able to use her to copy names is just amazing, because it sets up your field. It's basically like an extra copy of anything else you have in your deck. And when in a deck where name is really important, she is a must need. So grade 1s, 4 perfect guards, because come on, 100% orange is adorable. And there is somewhat of a reason for not using the unflipping perfect guards, the G perfect guards. That's because you can get by without needing to unflip damage in this deck if you play it right. And your rear guards are super important. You need to have the right names, the right field setup. And so if your opponent is trying to mess that up by attacking your rear guards, sometimes with a really high power lane, or say like brawlers, where they just get to attack your rear guards, you want to be able to protect them. And so that's why having the normal perfect guards is important. Next, we have 4 of the Valkyrie of Ranunculus Padmini. Sorry, didn't know the name on that one. She's the stride fodder for Nectar, which means when you use her to stride, she effectively counts as a grade 3. And in a stride-based deck, that's super important, just to be striding every turn. You don't want to miss a turn of stride. It really hurts your tempo. And the other effect is when it's called to rear guard, you can choose and you can reveal a grade 3 from your hand and then search up Asha. So that helps really in consistency, just to make sure Asha is always your main Vanguard, because while Vegetable Avatar Dragon is good, he's not quite as good for the deck for Asha, because he doesn't have those power plays on non-stride turns. And then you discard any card. So you can actually grab Asha and then discard like a draw trigger to ensure that you can stride later. So 4 of those. And the last grade 3, Sour Slicer. This guy is nuts if you have the right field, and even if you just need 2, they can make a 16k column, and that's because of the skill is during your turn, for every other Sour Slicer, he gets plus 1,000, so 7,000, 8,000, 9,000, and then 10,000. So probably won't have 4 on the field at one time, but if you can get 3, then it's 9,000, and that's why we're playing the 12k attackers, because that will get you a 21k column on the rear guard. The other common combo is using Maiden of Flourscreen along with Sour Slicer to copy the name, and then giving all your Sour Slicers another plus 1,000. So 4 Sour Slicers, basically the same as 3 Sour Slicers and 1 Maiden of Flourscreen. So you may have noticed we have 12 grade 2s and 12 grade 1s, which you might think messes up riding a little bit. It's not that bad. You generally don't grade lock, and even if you do, G-Assist will get you out of it if you choose to use it. But running 12 grade 1s really doesn't hurt you that much. And it's also important so that we can have 4 copies of everything. You know, we have 4 Sour Slicers, 4 Stride Fodders, 4 Perfect Guards, and then we have 4 of each of our grade 2s as well. And because the deck requires on names, you want to make sure that you have as many possible cards with the same name. Like if you run 3 of one card, then you call one and you damage one, and maybe you have one in your hand and you just can't get it from your deck anymore. So making sure we have 4 copies again of all of our cards ensures that we're very likely to have copies left in the deck so that we can use our skills effectively, like Asha's stride bonus skill. And it also means that we have 1 extra spot in the deck, which goes to running 2 starters, Bud, Maiden, Ho. Her effect is you can, at Generation Break 1, you can counterblast 1 and choose 1 card. And then you can choose up to 4 units with the same name as that card, and they get plus 5,000. So if you have a full field of like the same name, or something like say you have a full front row of Asha's, Bud Maiden's skill is going to give them all plus 5,000. And this can work even if you're in Stride, because as you know, the Stride takes the name of the grade 3, but it's also super strong. Let's do a little combo play. If you have Maiden of Flourscreen in a booster, because you can just turn Maiden of Flourscreen into the name of the booster, and then then Ho can give plus 5 to both of them, which is a super strong play, and is again why those cards are really good. So 2, the reason is not because she's amazingly powerful, but it helps add some consistency to the deck, because Asha and Vegetable Dragon, they need cards on the field already. And sometimes you don't quite draw that hand that gives you the early grade 2 or early grade 1 that I can call, be aggressive with, and then copy with Asha or Vegetable Dragon later. So by having 2 starters, I guarantee that unless it gets retired, it's pretty much guaranteed that you're going to have this on the field, and then you'll be able to call it from the deck. And yeah, sometimes it gets damaged, but what can you do? That's Vanguard sometimes. So 2 starters just to help make sure we have copy targets even in the early game, adds some consistency to the deck. And lastly, the triggers is 4 heals. Surprise, surprise. We have 8 crits and 4 stands. You don't really need draws that much in this deck, just because there's so much superior copying cards from the deck. You can maintain your advantage that way without having to do draws. And because the stand has an amazing effect, which is Generation Break 1, when it's placed on when it's placed on Rear Guard. You can ride a grade 0, but not that great of an idea. When it's placed on Rear Guard, you can put it on top of your deck and shuffle it back in, and you choose one of your units. And then up to 2 of those units with the same name get plus 5,000. So it's kind of like a mini starter. Or if you look at the other way, the starter is like 2 times of your stand trigger. And this effect is cool in 2 ways. One, it makes your rear guards really big, which means they're prime target for stand triggers, and you just put 1 back in to make them really big, which is a nice bonus. And the second is that when it's placed on a rear guard, you can pay the cost. So you can't have it sitting out on the field and just shove it into the soul, or shove it back in not in the soul, it goes back to the deck. So you just put it back in the deck whenever you want. It has to be, you call it and then it goes back to the deck, right? So that actually can serve useful, because if you have, say, this guy, some tricky thing you can do is you can have the stand trigger out. Say it's boosting just because there's not a lot of space here. Then you boost and you copy the stand trigger, and then when you call it, then you can use its effect. So if it was just an activate ability, you wouldn't be able to do that, and that can do some little tricky things with calling it during the battle phase, just to give extra power. So you got to be able to keep that. You got to keep that in mind, because creative use of this card can really make or break some of your games. And that's it with the main deck. So we'll just go into the Gzone now. First is we have 2 copies of Snow Element Blizza. His effect is when you attack, you can counterblast 1 and choose one of your cards in your Gzone and turn it face up. And then you'll get plus 5,000 for every face-up copy in your Gzone. So that serves 2 purposes. One is if you stride him first, you get 2 face-up cards in the Gzone at the end of the turn, which will unlock your Generation Break 2, which can help if you don't have any other grade 3s, you don't have another stride fodder, and you're not sure you'll get one on your drive checks. And the second is obviously the plus 5,000. If you stride a lot of times in the game, then he'll get really big. He can get up to easily over 40k by himself. So really good card, just adds a little consistency to the deck. The next is 2 copies of Sacred Tree Dragon Multivitamin Dragon. I can't really go into all the combos with this one because it's kind of complicated, but the skill is, if you don't know, when you call a card, then you can choose 3 other cards, so not the one that you called, that have the same name and they get plus 5,000. So if you're planning on doing a lot of calling in one turn, a lot of superior calling, so you have Gladiolus or you have some Maiden of Flourscreens out, so you can change out the name and give a lot of plus 5,000s, he's a good choice. Especially if you don't need, say, like to build more field and you just want to go for power plays. So the next 2 strides we have are 2 Flower Princess of Spring Arboreal. This is the trial deck stride, which has an on-hit skill of when you hit Vanguard, then you just get to basically do Asha's skill, which is copy one of your units, and the unit you called from your deck is going to get plus 2,000. So that's just a good pressure unit. Try to bait out a perfect guard or just build some field early if you know that they don't have one. So really good first stride, just to get some pressure and gain some advantage at the same time. And then we have 1 Atmos. The 1 Atmos might seem a little weird, but it's just because sometimes, like, if you want to do power plays but you don't want to use up your Blizza, then you get to use Atmos, who has a similar skill, but it's basically when it attacks you counterblast 1 and it gets plus 10,000. So that can really get through people's shields, or force them to drop a lot if they need to guard Atmos and they don't have a perfect guard in hand. And lastly, we have 1 Primavera. You don't really need more than 1, I think, just because you don't have 6 counterblasts, because she needs 3 counterblasts to use. And her skill isn't really necessary more than once, in my opinion, which is, if you don't know, counterblast 3, and then you can choose 5 normal units, so not triggers, from the drop zone, and put them into your deck. And then you're gonna search your Tues. Sorry, it's a long skill. Then you're gonna discard a card, and that's the cost. And then you get to choose 2 of your units, and then choose up to 2 copies for each of the units that you chose. And then call them to rear guard. So just a quick example of that would be if you have Flourscreen and Sour Slicer, you're going to choose Flourscreen, you're going to choose Sour Slicer, and then you're going to get 2 copies of Sour Slicer and 2 copies of Flourscreen and call them to rear guard. So usually what you'll... and since this is an on-attack effect, so I didn't mention that, what you're going to want to do is attack here with 1 column, then use Primavera and get your copies and call over them to make a whole new field with extra attacks for your triggers. So you don't really need, so again, you don't think you need more than 1, just because, again, it's a really hefty 3 counterblasts, and hopefully you don't need to go for the multi-attack and filling your field more than once. So that's why there's only 1. One point of contention with this deck that might upset some people is the lack of Jingle Flower Dragon. And Jingle Flower has a skill that gives all your rear guards the effect. For every rear guard that you have with the same name, it gets plus 2,000, so that will include itself. So say the ultimate field of 3 Sour Slicer and 2 Maiden of Flourscreen, you'd get, with Jingle Flower specifically, you get plus 2, plus 2, plus 2, plus 2. So you get plus 10,000 to your whole field, which is really strong. But the reason we don't run it is, one, because we just haven't picked them up, and it's a little budget version. But like sometimes a lot of decks, they're gonna be going after your rear guards. You're not gonna be able to set up this field, and Jingle Flower really relies on having like a perfect field. You really need to have like this for it to be super effective. So we decided for this deck, we'd rather have cards that are useful when you're not in your ideal situation. Because if you have your ideal situation, chances are you're probably already winning, and you don't need Jingle Flower to help you win more. You want cards that are going to help you get out of your non-ideal situations and add some more consistency to the deck, which is why we decided not to use Jingle Flower Dragon and stuck with things like Primavera, Arboreal, and Multivitamin. Oh, and Blizza for the Generation Break too. So I hope you liked our Maiden deck profile. Please subscribe, like us, and give us any comments about the deck. What do you think about us not using Jingle Flower, even though we're playing the Sour Slicer Flourscreen combo? What do you think about the grade lineup, having 12 grade 3s and 12 grade 1s and 12 grade 2s to maximize copies of everything? Don't forget to check out our Facebook and like our Facebook page. There should be links in the description. And also check us out on Patreon. It's gonna really help us out if you donate, because then we can keep making these awesome deck profiles for you guys and help you guys keep up with the meta. So thanks for watching. Vanguard Central out.